I don't know if you see this. I have a love-hate relationship with this right now. I'm testing out the iPad for my teaching, and I'm like, oh, there's my notes. There we go. Okay. Good morning, everyone. It's so good to see you. Happy Father's Day. And I was just thinking, Jeff, I think I could watch him do 75. Yeah, so I can one-up him. So dads, what a great privilege, I would say, in this stage of my life to be a dad. I mean, it is one of the great gifts. And I don't know if I always thought that, but I have come to believe that. And now I get to be a granddad. I mean, it's truly a gift of God. And so I hope you know, dads, how important you are to your families. Have a great day, but also know that you are needed moving forward and just celebrate the fact that you're a dad today. So it's been a little while since I've been here, and so I just want to acknowledge that. And about 3 weeks ago, Giselle and I, for those of you who don't know, we announced that we would be moving to Brookfield, Wisconsin. And I took a new position at a church there. And so, feels strange a bit to be here today. I'm glad to be here. I think it's really interesting and peculiar, maybe God's timing and all of this, that we're in this series called The Wilderness. And it was during a wilderness period in my life, and certainly as a family, we were going through a difficult time. I wrote a personal mission statement. And it said simply this: I want to be known, I want to live by faith, known by love, and be a voice of hope. Live by faith, known by love, and be a voice of hope. And then the other thing that has been an anchor in my life is Isaiah 6:8. That's one of my life verses. And, Isaiah has this amazing vision of God, the majesty of God, and he's overwhelmed. And then he hears the Lord saying to him, "Whom shall I send, and who will go for us?" And I said, "Here am I, send me." And I've always wanted to live that way, wanted to live open-handedly and ready to go if God calls. And so I would say those two things sort of became anchor points for us as we were making this decision. And what would the Lord have for us? And it's amazing to me how wilderness moments sometimes can actually build conviction and forge certain things in us. God uses that to grow us up, and we're going to talk more about that in just a minute. But let me just say this. It has been an incredibly rewarding season of life and ministry to be with you. I'm going to be around until August 3rd is my last Sunday. So I'll be in and out, and I'll probably see you again here on a Sunday morning. But I just want to say thank you to the incredible people that I get to work with and have gotten to work with. I've been kind of at a front row seat to many of your lives, and that's a privilege. And so thank you for that opportunity. You'll be in our hearts. There's no doubt about that. So I want us to move on. We're going to look at a passage in Exodus. We're talking about the wilderness and what that means. And that wilderness is this place of doubt, place of maybe struggle or feeling lost. I call it the land between. That's another way of thinking about it. It's like you can't go back. In fact, even to try to go back is really to be in denial, but you can't see a way forward either. It's like you don't know how to move forward. And so you're just maybe feel stuck. And so for me, that is this image of this wilderness moment. And it's like, what do we do in the midst of that wilderness moment? And so I want to look at invite you to open your Bibles, if you have one, to Exodus 13 and 14. It's the story of God's people, and just what's happening is they've been released from slavery. God rescues them. And they're really celebrating that, but they're fragile. But they don't even know it. It's like they think they're released, and they're kind of in this place of confidence, and yet God knows that they need to be protected. And I think sometimes if you're in the wilderness, you understand, you see this moment, but if you're in the season of celebration of joy, now is the time to prepare. They need to be preparing for that next, really, the wilderness experience before them. And so we're going to read the story, and just for you to listen, and then we're going to come back, okay? So let me read from Exodus 13 and 14. In verse 17, it says, when Pharaoh let the people go, God did not lead them on the road through the Philistine country, though that was shorter. For God said if they faced war, they might change their minds and return to Egypt. So God led the people around by the desert and road toward the Red Sea. God doesn't always take us on the most direct route, but the correct route. Okay? The Israelites went up out of Egypt ready for battle. After leaving Succoth, they camped at Etham on the edge of the desert. By day the Lord went ahead of them in a pillar of cloud to guide them on their way, and by night in a pillar of fire to give them light. Can you imagine that? I mean, the presence of God was with them, and God was leading them. And they could tangibly see it and experience that. So neither the pillar of cloud by day nor the pillar of fire by night left its place in front of the people. Then the Lord said to Moses, tell the Israelites to turn back and encamp near Pi-hahiroth, between Migdol and the sea. They are to encamp by the sea directly opposite Baal-zephon. Pharaoh will think the Israelites are wandering around the land in confusion, hemmed in by the desert. And I will harden Pharaoh's heart, and he will pursue them, but I will gain glory for myself through Pharaoh and all his army, and the Egyptians will know that I am the Lord. So the Israelites did this. Great plan. Okay, we're in. When the king of Egypt was told that the people had fled, Pharaoh and his officials changed their minds about them and said, what have we done? We let the Israelites go and have lost their services. So he had his chariot made ready and took his army with him. He took 600 of the best chariots along with all the other chariots of Egypt, with officers over all of them. The Lord hardened the heart of Pharaoh, king of Egypt, so that he pursued the Israelites, who were marching out boldly. The Egyptians, all Pharaoh's horses and chariots, horsemen and troops, pursued the Israelites and overtook them as they camped by the sea near Pi-hahiroth, opposite Baal-zephon. Don't encourage you to say that 10 times over. As Pharaoh approached, the Israelites looked up, and there were the Egyptians marching after them. They were terrified and cried out to the Lord. They said to Moses, was it because there were no graves in Egypt that you brought us to the desert to die? What have you done to us by bringing us out of Egypt? Didn't we say to you in Egypt, leave us alone, let us serve the Egyptians? It would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than die in the desert. And listen to what Moses says. Moses answered the people, do not be afraid. Stand firm, and you will see the deliverance the Lord will bring you today. The Egyptians you see today, you will never see again. The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still. I want to just begin with this statement. And I think it's true. I think it's true in life. I've experienced it in life. I think it's true biblically and what the scriptures teach us. And that's this. God often leads us down unfamiliar or uncomfortable paths. Not to confuse us, but to build our faith, display his power, and fulfill his perfect plan. It's not an easy statement, is it? In fact, let me ask you this question. What if God could do more with your surrender than with your control? What if God could do more with your surrender than with your need to sort of manage and control things? Especially when you can't go back and you can't see a way forward. You're in the wilderness. So, let's just look at some lessons. What will help us navigate our own wilderness experiences? What will help us as we think about this story and maybe what God is up to? Well, the first thing I think that I want you to remember is this, to remember the past faithfulness of God. Remember the past faithfulness of God. Now, I don't know if you know this, but in Hebrew, the word remember is used over 230 times in the Old Testament. 230 times, and 75 more times in the New Testament. It's like God's trying to say something, right? Remember, 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 remember. Remember what I've done for you. Remember, rekindle it. Remember it. In fact, in Exodus chapter 13, before I read those verses, in chapter 3 it says this: Moses said to the people, commemorate this day, that is the day of Passover, the day you came out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery, because the Lord brought you out of it with a mighty hand. Remember this day. Remember what I've done for you. In fact, if you think about the story of the Israelites, God's special people, he rescued them, but man, it was a journey. He did these incredible things. And it finally ended with this idea of Passover where it was so dramatic. I mean, the firstborn sons were killed, and the firstborn animals were killed. And only those who had the blood of the lamb on their household sort of doorposts were rescued. It would have been an incredible experience. And Moses says, remember God's power, God's faithfulness. Remember. In fact, he goes on to say this in verse 9 of that same chapter: this observance will be for you like a sign in your hand and a reminder on your forehead that this law of the Lord is to be on your lips. For the Lord brought you out of Egypt with his mighty hand. That sign in the hand, or a sign on the forehead, many Jewish men did that. They're called tefillin. Tefillin are simply little leather boxes that were wrapped around the upper arm and on the middle of their head. They put them there. Why? To remind them, and they put scriptures of the Torah in those little boxes, say, remember, with your head and with your heart, remember who God is. Remember what he's done for you. It's so important. In fact, we have our own ways. I don't have little leather boxes, but I do have this, right? We need reminders. In fact, if it isn't on here, it's really not in my life. I mean, that's how it's become. I'm so dependent upon. I need to remember. And the reality is, the reason for that is, why? We forget. We forget. In fact, I hate that. I'll give you a good example. I mean, just a few weeks ago, all the pastors in Grundy Center kind of take turns going to the care facilities in Grundy and providing services. And, there was a master schedule out there somewhere. It wasn't on my phone, I can tell you that. And I get this text. Hey, we're waiting for you. Are you coming? Well, I wasn't even in Grundy Center, so nope, not going to be there. I think, in Cedar Falls at the time. I'm like, oh my goodness. I felt terrible, but I forget. I didn't want to forget, but I forgot. And I do that all the time. I really wish I wouldn't, but I do. We forget. It's not like I'm trying to do that, but we forget. And that's exactly what happens. Listen to this story in Exodus 14. As Pharaoh approached, the Israelites looked up, and there were the Egyptians marching after them. They were terrified and cried out to the Lord. They said to Moses, was it because there were no graves in Egypt that you brought us to the desert to die? What have you done to us by bringing us out of Egypt? Didn't we say to you in Egypt, leave us alone, let us serve the Egyptians? It would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die in the desert. They forgot. They forgot all that God had done for them. We forget who God is. My guess is if you're in a wilderness experience and you're here today, there's been probably some moment in your life where you could point to God's goodness, God's faithfulness, God's kindness, God's love. We cannot forget his faithfulness. We tend to. And we forget what he's done. We forget how broken the world is and how broken we are and how desperately we need God. We forget that our faith journey is intended to be a group project, not a solo project. We need to encourage and help one another. We forget, though, don't we? That's why we gather every week. That's why we come together every week. We try to remember together. We try to rekindle something. We remind ourselves in song, in word, in prayer. Here's what God has done. Here's the faithfulness of God. Here's the goodness of God. Here's what he's done. We need to remember. If you're in the midst of a place where you don't know what is in store for you, you don't know how to go back, you can't go back, but you don't know how to go forward, remember the good things that God has done. In fact, I'd like to suggest not just weekly, but maybe daily. I brought this so you can grab one if you like, but it's a little card. It's called the Daily Prayer of Examine. I would just encourage you to think about it. It's just a way to take a few moments, whether it's at the beginning of the day or at the end of the day or even in the middle of the day. It doesn't matter, but it forces you to kind of think back over the last 24 hours. You say, where have I seen God at work? Where have I seen his goodness? Maybe it's a smile or a conversation or a note or an answered prayer or something. Maybe it's just the sunrise or the sunset, or maybe it's time with a friend or with a child. You say, God, thank you for that gift. Thank you for your faithfulness. If you're in a place of wilderness, try this. Try it. For a week, see what God does. Remember the faithfulness of God. Okay, next lesson. I think when we're in that place where we can't go back, we don't know how to move forward, we also need to trust in God's present and future grace. We need to trust that God is still God and he's still good. In fact, one of my favorite verses in all of life is Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to him, and he will make your paths straight. If you're a graduate and you got something from me, you got those verses. I'm sure you probably heard that. I write that, and I'm writing notes to graduates. Trust in the Lord. That's maybe the easy part. And lean not on your own understanding. That's the hard part. You know, I think in so many ways the Christian life is simply this. Am I going to trust God's way, or am I going to continue to live my way? I mean, that's it. Am I going to trust his way, or am I going to trust my way? That's the Christian life in so many ways. So to trust is to trust God's path, not ours. To trust is to trust God's path, not ours. Remember what I read in Exodus 13. When Pharaoh let the people go, God did not lead them on the road through the Philistine country, though that was shorter. It would have made sense. It would have been the logical thing to do. For God said if they face war, they might change their minds and return to Egypt. He was protecting them. So God led the people around by the desert road toward the Red Sea. God didn't direct them on the shortest path, but the right path. Now, I was thinking about this. Don't lean on your own understanding. What if God could do more with your surrender than your control? What if God could do more with your surrender than your control? There was, during and after World War II, this flight experiment. Psychologists referred to it under the names like the 180-degree turn experiment. What they did was they took skilled pilots, but they were only visual flight rule only. In other words, they could fly and fly well, but they could only fly by seeing where they were going. And then they put these pilots, these experienced pilots, in a simulator, in a simulation test, where they were forced to fly blind, like weather, like flying into a cloud bank. They couldn't see. And so they needed to trust the instruments. They literally flipped them And you know what happened? The average length of time before they crashed was 178 seconds. Less than 3 minutes. Because they thought they could navigate it on their own. They weren't willing to trust the instruments. And I think we do that in our own lives. Sometimes we fail to trust the instruments that God has given us. To trust is to trust God's path, and it's not always the straight path. I love this quote from a famous pastor. He says, Chuck Smith, "When you can't trace God's hand, trust his heart." To trust is not only to trust God's plan, but to trust is to trust God under pressure, not just in the plan. So, you have the plan in Exodus 14. God told Moses, who told the people, look, here's what we're going to do, and here's what I'm going to do. He tells them the plan. I want you to go encamp. They're to encamp by the sea directly opposite Baal Zephon. And Pharaoh's going to think, hey, the Israelites are wandering around, hemmed in, confused, and I will harden Pharaoh's heart. And he tells them that. He tells them the plan. And they're going, yep, I'm in. That's me, man. Yeah, okay. Sounds great. Let's do that. Until the plan becomes hard. Right? So the pressure. Exodus 14, 8 through 10, it says this, the Lord hardened the heart of Pharaoh, just like God said, so that he pursued the Israelites who were marching out boldly. The Egyptians, all Pharaoh's horses and chariots and horsemen and troops, pursued the Israelites and overtook them as they camped near the sea. As Pharaoh approached, the Israelites looked up, and there were the Egyptians marching after them. They were all terrified and cried out to the Lord. I don't like this plan, God. This is not a good plan. You know, I have learned, and I have shared over the last few years, just how much I've learned from the recovery community. And I have a good friend, and he made a statement that just, I don't know, it sticks with me. He said most addictions are really a disease of the emotions. A disease of the emotions. And what does he mean by that? Well, you know, if I have pain or if I have insecurity or if I have anxiety, it seems like, you know, my response in all kinds of ways, I mean, it doesn't have to be chemical, it can be all kinds of different ways. I want to resolve it. I want it to be resolved. I want it to kind of like move forward. And so I'll, you know, seek ways to avoid the pain or seek ways to avoid the pressure or seek ways to avoid the anxiety. I just want to act. I just want to get away. I want to escape. What if God could do more with your surrender in those moments than your need to control? Timothy Keller says this, you don't really know Jesus is all you need until Jesus is all you have. Am I willing to trust God, even under pressure? Even in those moments where I can't go back, I can't see a way forward. I want out, God. I don't like feeling this way. But I'm going to trust you. I'm going to trust. To trust is not only to trust God's plan, it's to trust God's plan under pressure, and it's also to trust is to wait and watch God work. I love what Moses says to the people. In these last couple of verses, Moses answered the people, do not be afraid, stand firm, and you will see the deliverance the Lord will bring you today. The Egyptians you see today, you will never see again. The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still. Be still. I think I've learned this lesson many, many times. I've had to learn it and relearn it. One of the ways I've learned it is parenting young adult children. I've asked myself, whose kid are you? Many times. Why are you doing that? And truth of the matter is, I have no control. Not really. And so I've had to surrender and say, okay, God, how can I pray? How can I encourage? How can I kind of wait in this place where I don't understand? I don't understand what's going on. I don't understand what they're doing. I want to change it. I want to fix it. I've learned it in life. I've learned it in ministry. You know, as much as I'd like to help people, I really can't. I've had to surrender and say, okay, I can pray for you. I can walk alongside with you, but I can't change you. I want to. Or I want to change the circumstances for you. I can't. But you know, when I've done that, and I've done that faithfully, and I've said, okay, God, help me wait. It's been amazing to be at the front seat of seeing God at work. You get to see it. But you have to wait for it. You have to trust it. Your wilderness Red Sea moment in your life may just be the clearest revelation of God's power you'll ever experience. It is a sign of what Jesus did for us in the gospel, right? There's nothing we could do to save ourselves. Jesus did the work. Jesus went to the cross. Jesus rose from the dead. Wait, trust, watch, receive what God will do. Let me pray. Lord, I know that many of us today are facing uncertainty, challenges, maybe hardship, or maybe we're in a place of celebration and joy. But God, help us to learn some of these lessons that you've been teaching for thousands of years, and over again, reminding us to look to you, to remember, to trust, to believe that you are with us, even in the midst of the hard moments of life. God, thank you that you are with us when we can't go back and we can't see a way forward. Be with us today. In Jesus' name, amen.